again, everyone. It's Lavon McMillan with the Advocate for Me podcast. And as I promised, we were going to have another guest, and I'm so excited the guest that we have on today. We met through a mutual friend. She just was one of our contributing writers to our magazine that'll be launching next week. And so I loved her article, and through email, we just kept communicating with each other. And I'm so glad that she's on today. Um, Great day, Shana Francesca. How are you?
I'm good, Levon. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, I was so glad that we were introduced. A friend, a fellow speaker forwarded me your email and was like, "Hey, you might want to respond to this." And I was like, "Hey, thanks, because I do."
Yes, yes. I'm so glad that she did. Because the magazine is pretty new. We launched it in October.
Mm,
And so we've been like, searching for contributing writers that want to take part in it. So the magazine is another resource because for our listeners, our motto is to make sure that we provide families with resources,
yeah,
advocacy, and training. And so, as much information that we can get out to families through the podcast, through magazines,
yeah.
through different events, that's our goal. And so, I'm so glad that we met. So tell the audience, who is Shana Francesca?
Yes. Hi. So I am a speaker, an author, and a consultant. I am a scholar of intentional and ethical leadership and living. What does that mean? It means I talk to people about what does it mean to be an intentional and ethical human, and what does it mean to be an intentional and ethical leader. Those things are obviously connected, right? Because if we are a leader, then who we are affects that, right? And we are all leaders, even if we're just leading our own life, right? So who we are in private affects who we are in public, and those things are deeply tied together. I got there because I was born into an abusive household and raised inside of an evangelical Christian cult. And so I experienced from my earliest recollections, um, you know, what it is to live inside of unethical leadership that isn't interested in your growth, isn't interested in the way you want to show up authentically in the world, but has decided the way that you're allowed to show up in the world, um, and is consistently putting restrictions on you, and punishing you for stepping out of line, right, as they define it. And so when I left those environments, at 26, um, finally found the courage and I didn't even, I just kind of was like, I need to leave. Right. I hadn't even given the cult I grew up in that language. I hadn't even recognized yet that it was a cult. I knew I grew up in an abusive household. I was very, very clear on that. But, I just didn't, my life was so turned around, and everything was encompassed inside of an abusive environment, abusive religious environment, abusive. So my whole life had been nothing but abuse and high control environments. And so when I left and started deconstructing, it took me about 3 years to like get my feet underneath of me and then start forming new community around myself. And I moved to Philly at the time at about 29 and started a book club so that I could like have community around myself, right? and and a community around my learning, especially because I knew I needed to open up my life to new learning because it had been so restricted. um, and then spent the next decade researching, personal development and leadership styles and psychology and philosophy, and reading authors like James Baldwin and Angela Davis and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Maya Angelou, and really just trying to understand, how do we show up in the world as ourselves? What questions do I even ask? Because I wasn't allowed to ask questions, not at least out loud, right? And I didn't even know what questions were valid as far as how I wanted to take up space. I didn't even know what was possible, right? Because possibility is removed from you inside of abusive environments. And as I started asking these questions and finding my way in the world, I started realizing that there was reflections of the environments that I grew up in the world at large, right? That the environments I grew up in were just the natural extreme of beliefs that were already held in our society at large. And that's when it really kind of piqued my interest and kind of sent me into overdrive, probably in my early 30s, of studying leaders who have shown up in ways that seem to foster innovation and creativity and an environment that their people want to be a part of, long term. And discovering what made those environments ethical, and made those environments inviting. And along the way, I didn't mention this to begin with, but I'm a neurodivergent human. So I was diagnosed with ADHD at 5. And so, as I was deconstructing, also finding my way to understand who I was in the world, because I wasn't really allowed to do that inside of the cult. I wasn't allowed to explore my neurodivergence. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. It wasn't allowed to take up space. It wasn't allowed to define me, even though it is who I am. Right. Um, and so there was all of these things going on at the same time that eventually led me to where I am now after a decade of research, realizing that my perspectives on leadership are extremely valuable. And, finding my way to the stage so I can share them in a more profound way with the world.
Wow. I'm just like, wow. Like your story. Um, I have two questions.
Yeah, go for it.
One, because we talk about mental health a lot
Yeah.
on our podcast. So when you were use the word deconstructing. So
Yeah.
I'm using that word. So when you were deconstructing mentally, how was that process? Especially like you said,
Oof.
coming from abusive
Yeah.
household, in a cult, and then also just I feel like leadership was already in you, and that's
Yeah.
why you kind of felt like I'm not supposed to be here at this place.
Yeah.
Um, and so that kind of what brought you out of
Yeah.
that environment.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like mentally, like what are some of the things that you did? I know community, you said
Yeah.
community one thing that was
Yeah.
important to you. And then a positive community at that instead
Yeah.
of just any type of community. Like
Right.
that's a lot to mentally
Well,
process.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and answer the
Yeah.
question.
I was like, I'm raring to go. Sorry, Levon. I'm raring to go. Okay.
Oh no, you good. You
Okay.
good.
so, so a few things. It was really hard. I want to start with that. There was many times in which suicidal ideation came into play, not only while I was in those abusive environments, but after I left them, because there's a lot that happens around, do I have a right to exist? Am I just fighting the inevitable? There's a lot that has to be deconstructed about your worth and your value,
Mm,
and recognizing, because when you grow up in those environments, your worth and value are externalized, right? They are given to you by someone else, and so they can be taken by someone else, right? And I really want people to listen to this. When you leave those environments, or when you take back your own power, you realize that those things are not external, they are internal. And no one has the right to give it you your worth or value, or take it. That your worth and value exist because you exist. Your worth and value are present because you are present. And when you sit in that, and when you can sit in that and be comfortable in that and be present with that, is when you find your confidence and your ability to show up for yourself and for the world. And it took me a really long time to get there, and it was a very difficult path. And I believe that all healing happens in community. I was able to step away from those environments and find my footing in the world, but ultimately it was in community that I found my way to healing, to support, to understanding myself, to understanding what was possible. I didn't even know or see the ways that I could contribute to the world fully. Other people helped me to see that. They worked as mirrors for me to understand what value I had to bring to the world. And that was really, really important. Now, I want to clarify, when I talk about community, I mean a very specific thing. There are I mean community in the ethical sense. There is unethical community, and that's where I came from. That is a place of death and homogenization. Homogenization is literally the process used to kill off unwanted bacteria, right? When it comes to our food, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a process that kills off unwanted bacteria. Unfortunately, oftentimes though, in our process here in the world, in America, it also kills off good bacteria. It kills off all dissent. They just want one singular product, right? That's what systems of oppression do. They require us to show up in a homogenized manner. Many people will describe America as a melting pot. Same difference. Same difference. It's the process of homogenization, and it kills off life. When I'm talking about community, I'm talking about an ecosystem. And there's this beautiful definition that I absolutely adore that I found from National Geographic on what an ecosystem is. An ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, along with weather and landscape, work together to form a bubble of life. Now, the two things that I want people to really get their hands around is the diversity required, and that diversity, when invested and supported by the weather and the landscape, right? And I look at the weather and the landscape as culture and
Mm-hmm.
as leadership. Leadership provides the foundational vision, culture provides that weather, right? The atmosphere for life, right? For the cultivation of a bubble of life, right? And so that's what true community is. And when I found my way to true community is when healing was actually able to happen for me. And then my life became very powerful because I could finally step into and understand my own power and be present to the fact that my life is all about me, but not at all about me, right? Like holding those two divergent thoughts at the same time, that I am not the center of the universe, but I am important to me and I am important, but I am important as part of the collective. And those things have to be balanced by one another. um, so, yeah, I think I answered all your questions.
No, W did. So, just like the process, like what things did you do to like? I know you said the book club,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, yes. Okay, great.
and then, yeah, so just like what things did you do? Like what steps did you take, or
Yeah.
have therapy? Like just go
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that our audience can kind of have an
Yeah.
idea, like because I don't know who's listening, so they may need to know like how can I
Hmm.
actually go through that process myself.
Yeah.
If they're thinking, I don't know my worth, but I know
Yeah.
I'm worthy. And
Yeah.
I know personally I struggle with that too. Like even with
Yeah.
the podcast and my business, and right now I'm going through like a lot of stuff personally because I just lost my dad, and
Oh, no.
I transitioned in November,
I'm
and
so
it was
sorry.
thank you, it was just out of the blue. So
Mm.
like with me right now, I'm like, do I still do that? Like, am I
Yeah.
like personally, am I still worthy to make sure that I still get this message out?
Yeah.
And then also making sure that personally I'm like I'm still here, and I know my
Mm.
dad was for me to continue on. So it's like that, that mental
Yeah.
struggle back and forth. So if you can share like just some of the steps that you took to get to to get yourself mentally prepared so that you would be like a prominent leader,
Yeah.
and like that you would be able to show your worth, and also continue to know that you was worthy,
Yeah.
that you are worthy, not was,
Yeah.
but that you are worthy.
Yeah. No, I
So,
know what you meant. Don't worry.
so yes,
Yeah.
I definitely like when you was breaking down that equals, I was like, yes.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go ahead and answer the question. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate the question. And I want to acknowledge that different people in the world have access to different resources. So I'm going to try to answer this in a way that acknowledges that you have to tap into what answer works for you based on what resources you have access to. Um, so, yes, I went to therapy. Yes, I've hired coaches. Um, I also have friends who we are all mutually coaches, right? And so we share information with one another. We support one another. We value each other's struggles, are able to be present with each other's struggles without trying to fix it, right? And I think it's really important that you surround yourself with people that, number one, understand consent, because that's a really important thing when it comes to your healing. People who are not trying to push their opinion on you when you didn't ask, because that violates consent and it violates boundaries. Really, the first thing you have to do is establish boundaries. And then you need to find people who respect and honor your boundaries because they're curious about what they are. And then they learn how to, then they understand how to respect you. And then they're accountable when they violate your boundaries. Right. And so those are the three pillars of my work is curiosity, respect, and accountability. That is what's required for all ethical relationship. And I explain it to people this way because curiosity is what's necessary. It's foundationally required for all relationship, right? We cannot form a relationship with people we are not curious about getting to know. That's
Mm-hmm.
foundational, right? But curiosity without respect is intrusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about this in terms of think of the as a white woman, I'll just be like, okay, let's use this example. If I were to go up to a black woman and be curious about her hair and touch her hair, is that appropriate? Absolutely not. Does that violate respect and her boundaries? Absolutely yes. Is that also a microaggression? Absolutely yes. My curiosity does not have a right to override someone else's boundaries, right? And so when we talk about actual ethical and an actual relationship, when we're invested in it, it requires curiosity balanced by respect, right? And then we have to think about the accountability piece. If we aren't interested in understanding the impact of our actions and taking responsibility for the impact of our actions, not our intentions, because our intentions don't really matter. And our actions are what actually matters. Our actions are what impact other people, right? So you can say, well, I didn't mean to hurt you. It doesn't matter, but you did. And so when you hurt somebody, we have to be able to find our way. We have to find our way to people who understand what actual ethical relationship is. They're invested in curiosity, respect, and accountability. And when we form community around ourselves of people who value and honor and hold space for those things and are present with those things in their life, then we can feel safe to explore our own healing. But when we are surrounded with people who aren't invested in those things, we know we are not safe to explore our own healing. And it takes a much longer time. So it's a multi layered process. It's working through our healing, understanding our boundaries, figuring out our boundaries, finding people in our life, or maybe people we've never met who honor and respect that journey, tapping into therapy, finding coaches and mentors. It's a multi layered process, which isn't shocking, right? Because I talk about the fact that a community is an ecosystem. So there's not going to be one silver bullet to your healing. It's going to be a whole variety of things working together for your good and for the collective good that help you to find your way to healing. And so, I think that's the thing we have to come back to is understand what relationship is, find our way to ethical relationships, surround ourselves with people who value that, honor that, and hold space for that, and then tap into what resources we have as far as therapy and coaching and so on.
Awesome. Yes, it definitely. And I like how you said it's like a multi-layered thing because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just one thing
Mm-hmm.
that'll help you. It's one, a process,
Yeah.
and two, um it's different ways and different things that can help you in that healing. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
No
Thank
problem.
you. My next question is you talked about being diagnosed with ADHD
Yeah.
at the age of 5. So I have two questions. One, just like your experience as a child, also because you were in a different environment um, with with within the cult and also in the abusive relationship,
Yeah.
abusive household,
Yeah.
and then also as an adult. I know my son recently got diagnosed. He's
Mm.
16 now, but he got diagnosed during the pandemic, so he was
Mm.
like 13,
Yeah.
14. And so, and as a parent, I'm like trying to navigate like how to assist him, um, with the process, as well as he's in high school, so he's like,
Mm, yeah.
like I did my homework, but now he's saying I didn't do, and then I'm like, but you forgot to hit submit. Like it's just like
Right.
little
Yeah.
like that. Organizational is a big piece for
Yeah.
him, and so. If you could just talk about your experience, your personal experience, and then also I just wanted the second question is in your article you talked about neurospicy, and that
Yeah.
was a new word for me. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I definitely got to have her on the podcast to talk about this.
Yeah. So
So,
that's a term. So neurospicy is neurodivergent is the accepted term. However, on TikTok, there's a whole neurodivergent community, and we have labeled ourselves as neurospicy. So neurodivergence is the term that is currently used to define those who have ADHD, autism, dyslexia, or dyspraxia. I think that it actually is a much broader term. I don't actually think there is such thing as a neurotypical human. However, I do think that it's really beneficial to understand that people who are classically, quote unquote, classically defined as neurodivergent have a very different thought pattern style than people who are, quote unquote, neurotypical. And so, I think some way to distinguish that is helpful in conversation. So I was diagnosed at 5. That was the age that my family had just joined the school, that was also part of the church that we later joined, and became this cult environment, that really encompassed my entire life outside of my house. Um, it was something that, I needed medication. So I medication was the thing that was really, really helpful for me, in order to be able to successfully navigate the deeply oppressive environments that I was a part of, because who I was not safe in those environments. So I needed medication literally to be able um, to not be othered even more than I already was. Right. And quite frankly, it really helped me. I say it this way because I don't know if I had grown up in a different way, would I have needed medication? Maybe. Right. And I'm not discounting the value of the medication. I'm just saying I recognize that the world has shifted and changed since 34 years ago. And that there are processes and procedures in place that help neurospicy individuals be able to navigate the world without medication better, but that doesn't discount that some people still need medication. My niece, for instance, is neurospicy and she is on medication and she needs it to be able to navigate the typical classroom because it's not built for neurodivergent people.
mm-hmm.
So that's, my experience was one where I, was not allowed to be, um, who I was. I had to conform. I had to do everything within my power and outside of my power to be as normal as possible, whatever the heck that even means. I don't even know what normal is.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah, I literally don't know what that means, but I had to try to accomplish it. And I had to try to be as close to perfect as possible. And I had to make sure that I wasn't making the people around me uncomfortable. If anybody is starting to notice the pattern in my, what I'm talking about is, the pillars of white supremacy, right? So in Tima Open's work, um, you know, to me, the right to comfort is the very, the like one of the most critical aspects that upholds white supremacy, because whenever you disrupt someone's comfort, right, those in power in this hierarchical oppressive system, whenever you disrupt their comfort, they have a right to enact violence against you, right? And so me as a neurospicy person, whenever I dysregulated or made uncomfortable the people around me, they had a right to enact violence against me, and I figured that out pretty quickly. And so I had to figure out how to constantly monitor the adults and the people in power around me to make sure that I was regulating them and I was mirroring their personalities back to them in order to not be have violence enacted against me constantly, right? And so it was, a deeply oppressive environment. So that was my experience. I think it's probably maybe not all that different, but in some ways very different experience for those who are not in religiously, coercive control environments. Um, what was the other part of your question? Can you remind me?
The other part was now as an adult, how as a neurospicy
Yeah. So
person. Yeah.
I went off my medication 3 years ago, and it doesn't mean I'm not going to go back on it, but I stayed on my medication until 35. Um, when I felt like I was at a place within my healing and within my life where I had a community of support around me that I felt like I could try to go without my medication and see what it would be like. See if I could navigate the world that way. And 3 years later, yeah, there's some difficulties, but I have figured out, even from the time that I was a kid, I figured out that there was processes and procedures that I needed to put in place in my life that could not be violated. So, like for instance, my wallet and my keys always are in my purse. If I take them out, I am not allowed to put them anywhere else but back in my purse. So they're either in my hand or they're in my purse. They are never allowed to be put down anywhere else. And I had to make that a habit so that I did not ever lose my keys in my wallet, because I would lose those all the time. If I don't, right, I lose them all the time. So I haven't lost them in years now because my wallet and keys are not allowed to touch anything else. There has to be certain patterns, right? So something that I've been working with my niece that I noticed was really helpful in my life is that my executive dysfunction gets the best of me. So learning how to regulate myself, for me, it's music and dancing. So through sensory moments that are sensory overwhelming, or when I need to regulate myself, I'm going to be listening to music and I'm going to be either dancing or performing an activity that I do not enjoy. So for me, when I fold or when I unload the dishwasher, I'm listening to music. I hate those activities, but if I zone into the music, I stop paying attention to what I'm doing and I hyper focus on the music, right? Um, and my niece has started adapting that, so she'll listen to music when she's brushing her teeth. She hates brushing her teeth, but by listening to music, she's able to override the overwhelming sensations and compromise and work with her body and her brain. So I think I've learned to work with my executive dysfunction and learn how to soothe it, right? And typically it's with music for me. And I have particular playlists. I'm old, guys, so I don't use Spotify. I use Pandora. I've had my Pandora stations since I was 26. You will pry Pandora from my cold dead fingers. So I have playlists that have been on there for 13 years now. I refresh and find new versions of them, but some of my favorites for working are like my Glass Animals station or my Bonobo station or my K Tronada station, where they're not songs that you want to sing to, because if they're songs I want to sing to, then I'm not going to get work done. But they've
Yeah.
got great beats and they've got pretty consistent beats that help to regulate me and help me to get into the zone and get my work done. So I think it's about finding what works for you, learning how to regulate yourself, giving yourself breaks. Dancing is really, really helpful. There's a book, especially for those who are like on a healing journey, which I think pretty much everybody born in America, you have trauma, you should be on a healing journey.
Yes.
You can't grow up in America without trauma. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny. And it's very, very true. So there's a book I recommend. There's two books actually. Um, Trauma and Recovery by Judith L. Herman. But be careful with that one. It's not typically triggering, but it's going to describe you back to yourself. And so, especially if you have complex PTSD like I do, and so just be gentle with yourself, take breaks, have a therapist on standby, as you're moving through that book. But if you read in tandem at the same time, or start with this book instead, start with My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. That book is about trauma, but specifically about racialized trauma and how we all experience it. But it specifically talks about trauma for racialized trauma as white and Black people specifically. And each chapter kind of oscillates back and forth between um, white trauma, Black trauma, and understanding that cycle inside of this country. But the thing that I love about the book is that he's a somatic therapist, meaning with every chapter, he will start it off by telling you the ways in which you are likely to be triggered. And then he talks about the things that you can do to move your body, to form community around yourself, to have support as you move through the chapter. And if you take those somatic practices and you take notes on those as you're reading books like Trauma and Recovery, you can also make sure that you're tapping into those practices and regulating yourself while you're working through your healing. So I highly recommend both of those books, and reading them in tandem can be really, really helpful.
Wow. So I'm gonna go get both of those
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, they are great books. Really, really good books. Yeah.
Oh wow. So I'll add. Are they in audio? Just because my device.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Girl.
Good. Good. Good.
Yes.
I was like, let me ask that question,
Yeah. Yeah.
just because my life
Yeah.
is running always, and so
Yeah.
I listen to audiobooks while I'm driving in the
Every
car.
book I read, I do my best to make sure that, and every book I recommend, I absolutely make sure, or I clarify that it's not. I
Mm-hmm.
make sure it's available on audio and physical form, because, or like, and digital form like Kindle, because people have their ways of accessing those things, and they have their tools, and they need to have access to those tools, and it just makes it just is another layer of accessibility that we have to be aware of and cognizant of when we're making recommendations to one another. So yes, absolutely.
Oh, great. I'm, yes, definitely going to download those today.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you so much. It has definitely been a pleasure to one, like I said earlier, like to put a voice with the face, because I
Yeah.
had your picture in the magazine, but I was like, I can't wait to talk to her.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, your story. Thank you for sharing it with us today. A lot of it, was personal, so I thank you for being open and honest and sharing, your experience and your journey.
Yeah.
Um, so the next question is, can you tell? Because I know you said you're an author, you're
Yeah.
a coach, you're a speaker. So can you tell the audience one, um, just a little bit more about your brand,
Yeah.
and then how they can contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.concinnate.world, and I'm sure it'll be tagged in the show notes, but I'll spell it out for you. Concinnate is CONCINNATE.world. So you can find all of my contact information there, information about me as a speaker. I try to update it as often as possible. Upcoming speaking engagements, and some of my past clients are up there, and definitely reviews and so on and so forth. So there's lots of information there, as well as my contact information. Or you can email me directly, Shana at concinnate.world. And Shana is SHANA. Yeah, and if you Google Shana Francesca, you're going to come across a heck of a lot of information. I've been on 130 some odd podcasts in the last 2 years, so there's lots of information out there on a variety of topics, that have to deal with my work, because each host is connecting with their audience in different ways. So, like this, conversation, each one is very unique. Um, and I love that aspect of it, so that people get really cool views and understandings of what I'm talking about and how it applies specifically to their life. There's also lots of articles that I've written, um, and I keep those linked to my website as well. So there's lots of ways to connect with me, and feel free to, check out my website and subscribe to my email blast that goes out once a week. And I'm sharing lots of stories and information for people there as well.
Awesome. As far as the coaching,
Yeah.
because I know everyone has like their own niche. What field are you in, like with the coaching?
So I talk to people about what is it to be an intentional and ethical human, or an intentional and ethical leader. So if somebody is in a C-suite position, typically I'm coaching them as part of my consulting work with their organization. Sometimes I'm just working with them directly, especially for like small business owners. If you are a small business owner, reach out, because the pricing on my website is catered to corporations and not individuals. Um, and I try to work with people's budgets as best as I can while still honoring my own contributions. Um, so the corporate rate to work with me as a coach is like $625 an hour. The small business, version is you could hire me for as little as half an hour, and that's 150 or 125 for a half hour, because my hourly rate is 250. So I try to work with people and their budgets. If you want to just pick my brain for half an hour, then we can do that, right? So just reach out and let me know.
Awesome. Well, it has definitely been a pleasure to have you on today, and I will definitely have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So as I shared with Shayna, this is Women's History Month, so she'll be our second guest on for Women's History Month. So thank you for coming on, sharing your journey. I hope the audience will reach out to you and find out more of uh, those important leadership skills.
Yeah.
Um, Also, just if anyone is listening to the podcast and you can relate with Shayna's journey, definitely, reach out to her. I just got a wealth of information just with you being on here today. So, especially like the books. So I will be reaching out
Yeah.
to pick
Yeah.
your brain.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, I also have my workshops. I've started condensing them down and offering them digitally through my website. And I make them pretty affordable prices for small business owners. So my standard workshops are $100, and they're 45 minutes long with a 15-minute Q&A at the end. And then I have one workshop that's $300. That's a 2-hour like intensive workshop around public speaking and building your personal brand, like the very beginning, the very baby steps that no one ever tells you, but you need to know. So that's there as well. If people are interested in, they're not exactly sure what questions to ask me or what kind of information but they want to connect with me. Looking at those workshops might also help to kind of guide you on what way you might want to interact with me.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, can you just give the website
Yep.
again one more time?
Yep, it's www.consonate.world, and consonate is Concinate. The first time you put it in, you're going to have to do the www part, because if you just put consonate.world, the internet's going to be like, "Are you sure?"
Well,
Because it's not .com, it's not .org, it's not .net, it's .world. So it just,
well,
it sometimes confuses the internet for just a second, but once you've put it in there, you won't have to do the www anymore.
okay, awesome. Well, I hope this podcast episode has helped someone. Definitely don't forget like who you are and your worth. I know this world, like we talked, it's a lot of trauma, whether it's relationships or just being in general in the world, with what we deal with, just as an individual, as families, as um, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot, and to process it, and again, like Shayna was saying, like how people treat you and how you got to set boundaries. Um, is a pleasure to have people that know their worth and that go out to help us so that we can know our worth and know our existence. So again, Shayna, thank you for coming on. And to our audience, uh, be blessed, be safe, and always know your worth. And again, always know that you can advocate for yourself, for your child, and for your family. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.